MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football by request. Urban Meyer's 10 greatest wins at Ohio State. Now, keep in mind, Urban Meyer won 87 games at Ohio State between 2012 and this final season that culminates with the Rose Bowl here in 2018 and New Year's Day of 19. So this is a difficult task. Consider the man won Big Ten championships in 2014, 17, and 18, went to the playoffs twice, had an undefeated season in 2012, won a national championship in 2014, finished in the top 10 every year, finished in the top 5 every year, excluding 2013. So this was a difficult task. So you will not be seeing, and so this is the honorable mention list. We've got the Wisconsin game in 2012, which kept the undefeated season alive at Madison with an overtime win in that game, 21-14. You've got even the Michigan game. So let me make this disclaimer. For many Ohio State fans, pure Ohio State fans, they would say, you know what, the top 10 wins are all Michigan wins, those 7, and then we'll fill in the other 3, because beating Michigan is always most important to most Ohio State fans. So we could have all 7 Michigan games, but I tried to give it a more objective national look at Urban Meyer's accomplishments at Ohio State. But we do have the Michigan game in 2013, in which the Buckeyes were a tremendous favorite, needed the win, though, to get to the Big Ten championship game as an undefeated team to keep its national title hopes alive, and won 42-41 on a failed Devin Gardner 2-point conversion. That didn't make the list. The Notre Dame win in the Fiesta Bowl in 2015-16 did not make the list, even though that elevated the Buckeyes to a final ranking of number 4 in the nation in defeating Notre Dame and finishing 12-1. And prior to that, winning the first of 4 games against Jim Harbaugh, 42-13, in which, surprisingly, Michigan was the favorite because the Buckeyes were coming off their only loss of the season, went to Ann Arbor, and Ezekiel Elliott had a field day, and they dusted off the Wolverines 42-13. That didn't make the list. Neither did the game against Oklahoma, a huge out-of-conference win in 2016, or the Wisconsin win on the road in 2016 that led to a college football playoff appearance. The comeback win from 18 down against Penn State, the remarkable comeback in the fourth quarter that won that game over Penn State 39-38, did not make the list, nor the game against Michigan 31-20 that closed out the run to the Big Ten championship game, nor the actual Big Ten championship win in 2017, defeating a 13-0 Wisconsin team, 12-0 Wisconsin team at that time, 27-21. Those did not make the list. Nor, how about the big game against Penn State this year, winning 27-26, a couple top 5 teams in Happy Valley, nor Urban Meyer's final win, what could be his final win against Northwestern to wrap up another Big Ten championship, 45-24. So we're mentioning wins against Michigan, wins against top 10 teams, Fiesta Bowl win against Notre Dame, Big Ten championship wins the last 2 years, and none of those made the list. So what could be on the top 10? Urban Meyer's 10 greatest wins at Ohio State. All right, here we go. Number 10 is the Cotton Bowl win against USC 24-7 last season. And the reason I mentioned this and it makes the list is from a historical perspective. Considering Ohio State aimed to get to the college football playoff, was left out at number 5, this could be a consolation prize that was meaningless. They still finished 5th in the country with the 4 playoff teams ahead of them. So I understand the impact was not that significant at the time, but historically it may be, considering that USC has dominated this series with Ohio State. They had won the last Rose Bowl appearance in the Woody Hayes run against Ohio State. They then defeated the Buckeyes to win the national championship and keep Ohio State in 1980 from winning a national championship. The 79 team, the 80 Rose Bowl, won another Rose Bowl against the Buckeyes in 85, beat them back-to-back years in 89 and 90, beat them in back-to-back years in 08, 09. I don't even know off the top of my head. I would have to count, and I did all this without any research. I would have to count how many USC consecutive wins they had against Ohio State. I believe it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 consecutive wins going back to the 1974 Rose Bowl. So Ohio State beats USC So the next time the Trojans and the Buckeyes meet as the Blue Bloods from the Big Ten and the Pac-12 that have reached the Rose Bowl the most times and faced each other either in the regular season or the Rose Bowl, this one odd appearance in the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State will finally be able to say, we won the last meeting against USC 24-7. That makes it significant all time. Number 9 on the list is the 31-24 overtime win against Penn State in 2014. That Penn State win was needed to win the national championship that year. The Buckeyes had already lost the game against Virginia Tech, so they had the loss. They could not afford to lose another game. And at that point, Ohio State was not really considered a national championship threat. But that win started to make some observers think, okay, this team might be capable of pulling this off. That Penn State team was not great. The Buckeyes got out to a 17-0 lead and had to hold on for the victory, get to overtime, and then the Joey Bosa sack of Christian Hackenberg wrapped it up after J.T. Barrett, who was hobbling on a bad knee, gutted out the win and scored the game-winning touchdown. So the Buckeyes win in Happy Valley, always a difficult place to go, 31-24 in overtime to sneak out of Happy Valley in 2014 en route to a national championship. That's the 9th most important Urban Meyer win at Ohio State. Number 8, we go back to 2012 and the Michigan State game in East Lansing. Buckeyes win 17-16 to move to 5-0. Now, of course, Ohio State was ineligible, so you could say, in a sense, none of these games meant anything because they couldn't even win a Big Ten championship despite going 12-0. But Urban Meyer was taking over a program that went 6-7, of course, had the coaching scandal with Jim Tressel, Luke Fickell, lost 7 games, and then Urban Meyer takes over. He took over a team that he was underwhelmed with early on. They were beating the likes of Central Florida, not the current Central Florida edition, UAB, by 14 or 15 points. They did not look impressive early in this season. They barely beat Cal at home. But this was the coming of age, gutting it out against not necessarily a great team. Michigan State didn't have one of its better teams in 2012, but going on the road, a Big Ten opener, difficult place to play, and Urban Meyer pointed to this game many times as being the impetus of a program-building game. They gutted it out, won a defensive battle, hard-hitting game, gut-wrencher, 17-16 with Braxton Miller with a big touchdown pass late in the game to Devin Smith to break it open and give the Buckeyes the edge in the lead and win the game again, 17-16, and route to an undefeated season, 12-0 in 2012. All right, the 7th most important Urban Meyer win, greatest win here. We go back to East Lansing 2 years later, 2014. Ohio State defeats the Spartans 49-37 as an underdog. Again, Urban Meyer is undefeated and will finish undefeated as an underdog because his team's a favorite against Washington in the Rose Bowl. Will finish undefeated 7-0 as a dog at Ohio State. And this is one of the games. Again, we didn't know at this point what we had with Ohio State. They'd lost to Virginia Tech. They won a couple games after that, but they went for their first Big Ten showdown on the road against a top 10 Michigan State team, and they exploded on offense and basically showed us what we would see the rest of the season marching to a national championship in dominant fashion. 49-37, game wasn't quite that close, and this basically proved that Ohio State had arrived as a national power, winning this game and moving on to the college football playoff eventually. So Buckeyes 49, Michigan State 37, game number 7. All right, Urban Meyer's 6th greatest win came in 2016. And following the win, you would have thought at this point in Urban Meyer's career that this would be a bigger win. At that point, because it seemed monumental, like game of the century big. Ohio State 30, Michigan 27 in double overtime. Ohio State moved on to the Big Ten championship game where they won it and moved on to the college football playoff. For Michigan, this game has been targeted as the turning point in Ohio State holding momentum and holding dominance of the rivalry. Of course, we had the fourth down conversion from J.T. Barrett and the measurement, the controversy of the measurement, which kept the Buckeyes alive to win this game. Michigan had kicked the field goal in the first session of the overtime, the first possession, and just following the J.T. Barrett conversion on fourth down, that was, again, very controversial. Like any spot that's that close, the officials could have marked it just about a number of places. That's where they marked it. Ohio State maintained possession. They would have lost the game right there on the measurement. Curtis Samuel made the incredible run prior to that to set up the fourth down play, then made another great run on the cutback to the left sideline to win 30-27. Buckeyes, again, move on to the college football playoff. I had mentioned the Big Ten championship game. Obviously, Penn State went the college football playoff, but fell with a thud to Clemson 31-0. So that was the result of the season. Otherwise, at that point, you would have thought this would have rated higher. A dramatic win against the rival Michigan. And yes, that kept Urban Meyer perfect again. So it's huge in maintaining the rivalry, dominance, and another college football playoff appearance. Ohio State 30, Michigan 27 in 2016, double OT game in Columbus. Our Urban Meyer game number 5 in his coaching stint at Ohio State is the 2012 Michigan game. Buckeyes win at 26-21 in Columbus. Again, you can take a different slant on the 2012 season. Ohio State, had they not been ineligible, would have been playing Notre Dame for the national championship. We discussed this week with a number of our guests, and it's really an error in judgment at the time and certainly in the aftermath and the hindsight in reviewing what athletic director Gene Smith chose to do to take as a penalty and wanted to play the bowl game in 2011 that was completely insignificant, in which they lost to Florida in the Gator Bowl as a 6-6 team. Therefore, they were ineligible for a bowl game the next year, could not play in a national championship game, which they would have played against Notre Dame, who was the only other undefeated team in college football. So this, in a number of ways, was significant despite the postseason ban. Of course, it's always Michigan. That's always important. That's always the game. Buckeyes win it against Michigan. Urban Meyer's first Michigan game. He had wanted to coach in this game his entire life, knew what the game meant, and they finished off a 12-0 season, and the banner hangs in Ohio Stadium as an undefeated, great Ohio State team that finished 12-0. Great, not in the way they played, but the results on the field spoke to greatness. They finished 12-0. They beat Michigan. It's the start of the dominance against the team up north, winning 26-21. All right, game number 4 in Urban Meyer's ledger at Ohio State is the 62-39 demolition of Michigan 2 weeks ago. This completes Urban Meyer dominance against Michigan, which is not going to be tainted now. Now with his retirement and whether he coaches elsewhere again, he is 7-0 against the team up north. And again, Ohio State outsiders may not completely grasp this, but think about your rivalry game and magnify it from there. Finishing 7-0 against Michigan will always stay with Urban Meyer in Ohio State annals. Nationally, he'll be judged based on Florida winning 2 titles, Ohio State winning the 2014 game, the great winning percentage, the greatest in college football history in the modern time since World War II. All those things in terms of a record, championships. But for Ohio State Nation, Buckeye Nation, 7-0 versus Michigan. And this was the game that was going to end that. Michigan was the favorite. They were playing much better. The nation's #1 defense. And this showed that Urban Meyer could still coach in a big game and out game plan. And also his coaching genius is basically recruiting and raising the level of his team when they have to play a rivalry or postseason game. He gets that done at a greater rate than just about anyone ever. And he did it here against Michigan, 62-39. Again, a game in which Ohio State came in reeling, Michigan rolling. Buckeyes win at 62-39. All right, game number 3. Urban Meyer's list as his top 10 games at Ohio State is the national championship win against Oregon, 42-20, 42-20. The Ducks were a 5-point favorite, even though the Buckeyes had proved themselves the previous 2 weeks. The prognosticators still pegged Oregon as a pretty substantial favorite at 5 points. I thought it was a joke at the time, and it proved to be a joke. Now, you may think, what in the world? He's got 2 games above Urban Meyer's only national championship at Ohio State? Yes, I do. But obviously, this one could be selected number 1, and that would make sense as well. 4 turnovers, none for the Ducks, and Ohio State was still that dominant to win this game, 42-20, and denounce Oregon's speed advantage, tempo advantage, and the Buckeyes rolled to win a national championship. Improbably, considering the 2 games start at 1-1, 42-20 over Oregon. That's our game number 3 in Urban Meyer's 10 greatest wins at Ohio State. Game number 2, the 2014 Big Ten Championship win over Wisconsin, 59-0. You have to understand, yes, it was 59-0, so how could that be the second greatest win? Well, the circumstances of J.T. Barrett, who set the Big Ten scoring record that season, broke Drew Brees' touchdown record in the Big Ten in 2014. That's how dominant J.T. Barrett was. I know he's got his detractors, but look at the man's record and his prolific statistics on the field, and it started in maybe his best season, 2014. And so with just a few minutes left against Michigan, he breaks his ankle. He's carted from the field, and in comes this Cardell Jones. Well, he only had to protect the lead against Michigan. He gets them there, and then there's this complete uncertainty as to what Ohio State has at quarterback because J.T. Barrett was the backup to Braxton Miller. So Ohio State working with his third-string quarterback against a Wisconsin team that was rated top 5 in the nation in defense, was a top 10 or 12 team nationally. And the Buckeyes came out and won 59-0 as a 4-point underdog. And this is what catapulted, of course, Ohio State needed this type of statement game to make it to the playoff. Had they won this game 21-17, who knows if they would have made the playoff and Urban Meyer would have won a national championship at Ohio State without that kind of effort, not just beating Wisconsin, but annihilating Wisconsin 59-0 and winning the selection over TCU and Baylor to get to the college football playoff and set up game number 1. Urban Meyer's greatest win at Ohio State, I believe, is the 42-35 win over Alabama in the college football playoffs in 2014. So despite the effort against Wisconsin, despite winning 9-10 consecutive games, Ohio State was still a double-digit underdog against Alabama, which seems ridiculous at this point because basically Ohio State had a more talented team, even though Bama was great. Ohio State had an NFL team, top to bottom, which Alabama could argue that they did as well. These were 2 titans, and especially considering the rivalry that had started back at Florida against Alabama and Nick Saban, this was the meeting again of Nick Saban versus Urban Meyer. So there was that drama to it as well, that great coaching matchup. And then, of course, 2, maybe, well, I don't have to say maybe, certainly the 2 dominant powers in college football over the last 15 to 20 years have been Alabama and then Ohio State. And they met on the field in the Sugar Bowl with Alabama a decided favorite, 10 points, and Ohio State, after dropping down 21-6, in which they were not being outplayed, took over the game, won 42-35, and it was a great game. And that catapulted, obviously, Ohio State to the national championship. But that was the game in which I believe, and said it at the time, this is the national championship game, Ohio State and Alabama. Either one of these teams is going to blow out Oregon. And that's what happened. Ohio State, 42-35 over Alabama. Urban Meyer's greatest win in Columbus as Ohio State coach. Would love to hear what you have to say. Keep in mind, there's a lot to choose from here, and I certainly ran down the honorable mention list as well. Would love to get your thoughts, your feelings, your perspective on Urban Meyer's career at Ohio State. We'll be back with the ranking of Urban Meyer's worst losses. And because there's not many, it's going to be all of them. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.